In this lecture, I would like to talk about three things. The first one is going to be urbanization in general, and why do we even talk about cities. And the second one is going to be nature-based solutions, which Anton already kindly introduced yesterday, the definitions and the concept, and why Europe is focusing on nature-based solutions in cities. This topic is quite relevant for most of your work, since you are interested in geography and biology, and this is a field that tries to bring, biodiversity and biological processes to cities. So this is why I think it's an interesting topic for you to know about. And lastly, the third part of this session will be group work, so more group-oriented exercise. Does this make sense? Okay. So first, my background, if you don't remember from Saturday, is in this field. So I'm researching nature-based solutions in different cities. I'm mostly doing work in Europe, but I have done work in China and Singapore and Canada as well. So some of the examples I will bring are from North America or East Asia, where I have already did some research. First, I wanted to talk a little bit about urbanization. So as you may know, 200 years ago, less than 3% of the population lived in cities. 100 years ago, it was about 15%. We just reached 50% 10 years ago. And the United Nations projects that we will reach about 70% by 2050. So the world is clearly and rapidly urbanizing. And basically, all of the increase in population in this planet are expected to take place in cities. To 8 billion, 9 billion, 10 billion, all of these new people will probably end up in cities, while rural areas are going down or stay steady. So this is one reason we talk about cities. The other one is if you look at this graph, it's a demonstration that economic development is accompanied by urbanization. On the horizontal axis is per capita income, and on the vertical axis is the proportion of the country that is living in urban areas. So as you can see, it's an upward sloping curve. So higher incomes mean more urbanization generally, and this is why we also expect the world to keep urbanizing, because as economies develop, these countries get more highly urbanized. And as we have discussed on Saturday, and also as Anton kindly explained yesterday, if most of us are going to live in cities, we have to ask a question, what makes a city sustainable? Because again, we are aiming for this good life within environmental limits. And the answer I like to give to this question, so, how can we make cities sustainable, is quite twofold. So first of all, sustainable city is a green city. So green in a literal sense, that there are parks and places for people and open areas for people, but also green in a sense that its economic impact and sustainability impact on the environment and its ecological footprint of the city is also limited. So again, how do we make a city sustainable? If we look at what many cities tried, I wanted to raise a few crucial points. So these are the topics that cities usually focus on when they create a sustainability plan, sustainability strategy. These are points taken from plans of more advanced cities. Well, one is, for example, the energy system. Of course, you guys don't deal a lot with energy topics, but still, it's a crucial part of cities' sustainability. It's a major contribution to greenhouse gas emissions. So it's a good question if cities could be both energy efficient and could also be based on low carbon and clean energy technologies. Question about transportation. Cities can be places of incredible congestion, smog, huge waiting times, traffic jams, people breathing in polluted air, and of course, again, large amounts of carbon dioxide emissions coming from burning petroleum and diesel. Or cities can also be places of highly efficient transport systems. Very clever integration of walking areas, bicycle areas, various kinds of public transportation, taking pressure off car traffic. And so the nature of a city's transport is crucial determinant of its sustainability. Cities are unsustainable when they aren't properly prepared their water supplies. So just about every single large city in the world has a huge job to do in anticipating its water needs and ensuring that water and sewage wastewater treatment is properly managed. So again, it's a crucial aspect of infrastructure. Pollution of air and water, so this affects cities today that are still rapidly growing industrially, but also those that industrialized in the last 30 years. And these sort of insufficient attention to pollution caused many cities to be hazards for their populations. The air that people breathe in, the water they drink can take away years of their lives. And for example, you probably know that China was shocked in 2013 when major smoke descended on Beijing. And it was so heavy, it actually exceeded all sorts of thresholds and guidelines for air pollution 30, 40 times. And it caused the city to really come to a halt. It was a terrible shockwave for China, and they realized that they have to tackle this massive air pollution. And the good news is that it's possible to do it. So they have done a set of measures. So Chinese cities implemented a couple of things. One of them was very efficient public transportation. They have reorganized their public transport so that less people need to use cars. The second one is that they have relocated the more dirty industries outside of the city. And the third one was huge reforestation programs. So Chinese cities are planting a lot of trees. The number of trees they're planting is unbelievable. So I have worked in Tianjin in China, which is it's a fairly large city, but they plant millions of trees. Since 2013, they have planted more than 3 million, which is huge from European point of view. In European cities, we struggle to ask municipalities to plant maybe 1,000 new trees a year. And in China, they are talking about millions. So they have done huge reforestation projects, and it's quite successful. So if we talk about air pollution, the number of polluted days in Chinese cities went down by 60-70% in the last 3 years. And the particulate matter concentration, PM2.5, PM10, it went down by about 50%. So that's a big drop. And they achieved it with urban policy and concentrated efforts. So I think it's quite remarkable that they have took on this challenge and fixed it. So cities' infrastructure, from water sanitation to waste management, its ability to recycle industrial waste, to control industrial pollution, are really also important parts of cities' sustainability. So not one of these issues, energy system, transport system, waste management, waste recycling, green areas, resilience is something that takes care of itself. So all of this efficiency and low ecological footprint, low impact on the environment is an aspect of a city that needs to be planned and needs to be managed. So it doesn't take care of itself. It needs good decision-making, good experts, and good governance. It's something we have discussed on Saturday. One aspect I wanted to show, we discussed why setting goals is important on Saturday. This is a snapshot from New York City's sustainability plan. And you can read it. Maybe you will be able to read it in the PDF when you get it. Well, this is a sort of a dashboard that describes goals for the city, specific quantification of these goals. So they wanted to accomplish improvements in these 10 areas, for example, that I have mentioned. So in all of these areas, they have set specific goals. What is our target number? What do we want to achieve? And they have set up a monitoring system to understand where they are. They collected the data, and they also basically publish a report each year. You can find it online that basically explains where are they headed and how are they doing with these goals. And this kind of metric based on quantified goals, sometimes real time and always updated, is quite important to measure progress. Again, it's something we can take from the Saturday lecture, is that measuring progress is really important when you would like to achieve something in a systemic level. So again, cities are highly connected to the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals agenda, because of this. So, well, maybe you can look at these slides. This is New York City's plan, and you can see this indicates how are they doing compared to the previous year. So usually they would like to see lots of greens, but if it's yellow, it means it's stagnating or it didn't really achieve the annual target. Some more metrics. Okay, and another aspect I wanted to talk about is resilience. So what is resilience? Cities are highly vulnerable to all sorts of shocks, cyclones, hurricanes, heavy rainfall, droughts, heat waves, floods, landslides. These all threaten lives and livelihoods. Because, whether we like it or not, cities are also going to be experiencing changes in climate. And, knowing how cities are going to be affected is important. Cities need to prepare for these shocks, all sorts of shocks, and mitigate these threats to anticipate the risks. So making cities resilient so that they can withstand all sorts of these shocks is important and absolutely fundamental part of sustainability, and a fundamental sign of unsustainability if these preparations are not made in a city. And talking about resilience, turns out that nature-based solutions, this concept and these natural infrastructural elements are really contribute to urban resilience in many, many ways. And I was involved in a few resilience studies on cities, and we always conclude that you need to have more greenery, you need to have more nature, more biodiversity, more trees, because it's a win-win. It's a good solution to contribute to urban resilience, and it's actually very cheap and compared to other solutions. And for example, we are normally, for example, preventing flood by building walls, building higher dikes and dams. And this is, I would call, a sort of a fail-safe response paradigm. So the probability of failing that the dams are going to be breached are low, but when it happens, the consequences are really high. And this is already coming back to bite us because of the climate change issues. These floods and these shocks are going to be higher and higher. And we also know that we need to build something else, another kind of resilience. And this is where nature-based solutions are really coming to the picture when it comes to risk reduction. And this is what I would call a safe fail. So the probability of failure is higher, but the consequences are much, much lower because it gets absorbed in the system. So it's a more organic approach. This is why cities need to plan with nature and not get rid of it. And I would like to introduce the concept of urban tinkering. And since some of you are biologists, this concept took inspiration from a biologist, evolutionary biologist, and a philosopher, Tom Sanger. He developed the idea around urban tinkering. And since, evolution tinkers to modify and adapt functions to changing environments, so this was the basis of his idea that cities should also do this kind of tinkering and adaptation process based on local needs and local actions. And so this concept was created that cities could do smaller modifications in their structure so that it's more adaptive to the changing environment and changing needs in society, because they also happen. In the last 30, 40 years, society changed a lot, but cities usually didn't. So just wanted to bring some examples which I find quite interesting. The first one is a rather well-known example from Seoul, from South Korea. It was an old highway that was built in the 1970s. Suddenly, in early 2000, they have realized that they don't need the highway anymore because the changes in the urban pattern. And they modified what they already had, this old, destroyed, almost unused urban highway, and they changed it into a linear park. So they changed it into this. And this highly appreciated by the people. So this became a very famous and a nice place to be. The other one is a similar story. You probably heard about it. I just visited it this summer in New York City. It's the New York High Line. So this used to be a cargo railway line that led into the heart of the city. It was a logistic railway, but then it was abandoned, and they wanted to absolutely remove it from the city. But instead of doing that, they turned it into a linear park. So now this, I think it's about 10-kilometer long linear park above the streets in New York. And it's, again, very, very popular. It's a fantastic place to hang out with your friends. So, again, this kind of tinkering and modifying what exists in the city, looking for solutions, can also be applied in all sorts of urban environments. So not just rich places like New York and Seoul. And in fact, most of the cities in the world don't have a lot of money. They don't have a lot of financial resources. Also, this extra 300 million people that is going to urbanize in the next 10 years are not going to be born in rich cities. In fact, most of the urbanization is taking place in poor places. So this is why it's important to see that also most of the mayors in the world, we have about 1 million cities in the world, they don't have money, they don't have financial resources. Yet you can do all sorts of projects and modifications, even in the poorest of places. So nothing is useless. We can use what is there and transform its function at a very low cost. If there is a need and there are ideas and there are solutions on how to do it, it can be really a low cost. For example, Havana is capital of Cuba, is completely self-sufficient on food. It used to be, and that was not done by the government. It was done by the people who wanted to transform because they had to under economic pressure. And Havana is a very poor city, yet it managed to achieve this food self-sufficiency, which most rich cities still cannot do, even though they want to. So again, it has nothing to do with money. Sometimes it has to do with people and tinkering. So, as Anton said yesterday, harnessing ecosystem services and working with nature in an engineered way in cities provides us a lot of benefits, and I will talk about a few of these benefits later. But because of this, because of using nature is good for cities, it now attracted a lot of attention in policymakers in Europe. So high-level people, they wanted to know more about this, and lots of research projects were started in this field, about 10 of them with the different partners and different universities. And I'm involved in one of these. I'm writing my PhD in a framework of one of these projects. And I wanted to introduce some findings from this particular project. So the benefits of nature, Anton probably introduced some of these yesterday. We can categorize them into 4 groups or even 5. Of course, there are environmental benefits, adaptation to climate change, urban water management, enhancing biodiversity. There are also social benefits, encouraging physical activity, contributing to mental health, so less depression, fostering social bonds, access to all sorts of community events. This is social benefit. There are, of course, economic benefits. Sometimes nature basically is a more cost-effective solution than gray infrastructure when it comes to stormwater management, for example. And of course, there are also urban and cultural benefits, having a sense of place, connection to your city. So these are all sorts of benefits that nature provides. And the list is actually really long. So just wanted to flesh it out, and you can see the definition of nature-based solutions. Anton has talked about this yesterday, so I'm not going to read it up. We have a project called Natureovation that I mentioned. It's a 4-year, €7 million project. We have 17 partners and 6 partner cities in Europe. And well, the idea here is to explore all sorts of funding and policy and governance modes that make nature-based solutions happen and understand why they are successful. And in principle, we work with about 100 cities in Europe. We have 18 more closely related partners where we have done more in-depth research and analysis, plus 6 cities outside of Europe, including China, Australia, Canada, United States, where we also do some activities. And as I mentioned, we have 6 closer partner cities where we are actually working with the mayor, working with the local stakeholders, the local businesses, and trying to get them around the table and discuss with them what could be done in their city. So this is how the project looks like generally. And one output I wanted to show you guys is this Urban Nature Atlas. I think it could be a very useful resource for you if you would like to work in cities. So this is basically a database of about 1,000 projects, quite a detailed database. So if you are interested in urban wetlands, or if you're interested in community gardens, you can just go up to this website and look for successful projects that happened in Europe. You can understand how were they funded, who was implementing it, how did it look like. So lots of information is available in about 1,000 projects. So it's quite a large database. This is so we have covered these 100 cities. They were selected from the Eurostat urban audit to represent different geographical locations and different parts of Europe in terms of, different climates, different economic development, proportion of green space, etc. And then we have analyzed what is going on there. Well, this was the methodology for creating the database. So we were specifically looking for the challenges addressed and what kind of activities took place, the ecosystem services that were provided, who were the beneficiaries, who was benefiting from this project, how was it funded, and what can we learn from it. So these are the main aspects that we have looked into. And okay, so this is how it looks like. If you go up to the website, this is what you will find, and then you can do your own search. Basically, you can search based on sustainable development goals as well as if you're looking for really cheap projects, really low-cost interventions, you can just click on this €1 sign. If you're looking for water-related projects, you can again put on a filter, and then you will find search results that look like this, lots of projects, and you can click on them and find out more if you are interested. So these are just short summaries. And a couple of insights. I wanted to share. So talking about trends in Europe when it comes to nature-based solutions, this is a figure that shows the type of nature-based solutions per ecological domains. So almost half of the studied projects that we have found doing this broader search were related to parks and urban forests in cities. But there are also significant amount of blue infrastructure projects, so water-related, waterside development, and quite a lot of community gardens, surprisingly a lot of community gardens. These are the kind of urban challenges they address. For example, the lack of green space, the lack of biodiversity, health and well-being, environmental quality, air quality. These are the kind of challenges that these projects address. And I will introduce a couple of projects in a minute, but wanted to give you a bit of an overview because we have quite a detailed data on this and it's quite interesting. Again, you can search based on the Sustainable Development Goals. For example, if you look at projects in climate action, almost 1/3 of the projects directly address climate change related challenges. Okay. 90% of the interventions directly benefit citizens or community groups, which isn't surprising, but still it's a good argument. And about 15% of the projects benefit disadvantaged groups, which means disabled people, families with young children, elderly, etc. So lots of the projects are directly beneficial for these people who have maybe less access to other kinds of recreational opportunities. In terms of ecosystem services provided, which can also be measured and quantified, we have quite clear data on this. For example, 70% of the nature-based solutions in the database deliver recreational and health services. About half of them support habitats for species, 40% support genetic diversity, 31% contributed to air quality improvements, 25% to flood regulation. So lots of benefits again. About 20% provided food. So lots of community gardens provide food for local communities. In terms of how much they cost, we had about 16% that were actually under 50,000 euros. So really considered to be low cost. And some of these are actually just a few hundred euros. So I will actually introduce a project that costs almost nothing and it delivers quite a lot of benefits. Another interesting thing is based on the data in terms of governance arrangements, there is a steady shift away from municipality and public-led projects. So it's not anymore that the government is running these large projects and medium projects and small projects, but it's community-based and sometimes company-based, private-led initiatives are growing. Of course, municipalities and the government still has an important role to play, but about 40% of the projects were hybrid projects. So a cooperation between a government and the community or a government and the private actor, which means it's not only the municipality and the government that it has to implement all of this. It can also be bottom-up, private or community-led. And I think, again, it's quite interesting to think about. Couple of examples. Okay, so this is from Barcelona, Spain. The municipality created a new policy called Pla Buits, and it means there are vacant, empty areas in the city which the municipality identified. Maybe it used to be a building and they have demolished it, or they just never finished it. And basically the city announced that if you are a community or a community member or an NGO, you can propose a plan to use that space, and the city will help you acquire the permits and help you settle in and start to do something there. And in the first year, when they have started to run this initiative, they had 14 of these vacant urban spaces that they wanted to give to the community, and 9 out of 14 became a social community garden. So this is apparently what people come up with if they are given the opportunity to do something and they are given some resources, maybe some tools. So in the first 3 years, these community gardens appeared in Barcelona, and they have lots of educational and therapeutic and cultural activities in these. Again, so these areas were selected by the city based on their municipal databases, but then they offered it to the communities, and the communities came up with these kind of plans, and they have done the implementation. And I think it's quite interesting example, because Eastern Europe has a lot of these vacant spaces in cities. Actually, overall, we have lots of shrinking cities and lots of cities that are not growing as well as, the ones in Western Europe or East Asia. And so there is lots of vacant space available for different kind of activities. So it could be interesting to think whether such projects could be implemented in Pskov or elsewhere in Eastern Europe, because space is available and the people need these kind of activities and benefits. Another example is, I'm just going to go through a couple of these quickly. So the Artemis Lagoon in Athens, in Greece, it has a large local significance for its biodiversity, with the presence of lots of rare bird species. And the goal of this restoration in Athens, which is again not doing too well economically, was to keep this high bird species diversity, preserve the landscape, this was quite a polluted area, and protect the ecosystems in a peri-urban area. So you can find more information, for example, in the database if you're interested in learning more about this restoration projects, for example. Doncaster in the United Kingdom, they have done this is a nationally important wetland habitat, and so it was restored near Doncaster in the United Kingdom as a part of a European Environmental Agency-led project. But they worked with local communities, and they worked based on local wildlife needs after assessing it, and they also wanted to reduce flood risk in Doncaster. So this is again one of those interventions that try to build urban resilience and manage flood risk, while also benefiting local communities and wildlife. So, but the goal was also to improve water quality, and they have created a larger catchment area in case of higher rainfall events. So this was most of the actions that they have took. Oslo in Norway, for example, they are now doing a large-scale opening up of rivers. So previously, these were running in underground pipes throughout the city. And for example, in Alna Environmental Park, there is this project that will include a larger transformation and environmental upgrade of the river Alna, restoring also parks and transforming lots of gray structures into green, but they are also bringing the river onto the surface. So this is again a sort of a movement that is taking place also in Italy. They have lots of these underground rivers which were put underground because they were smelly, because people didn't want to see it in the Middle Ages and afterward, but now they would like to reconnect with water, and they are bringing lots of these rivers up to the surface. This project is from Bonn in Germany. The goal was to renaturalize a stream. It was in a heavily industrialized area, and they wanted to increase flood capacity and create a recreational space. It's about an 18-kilometer long stream that flows into the Rhine River, and they have done a comprehensive restoration, again based on biodiversity targets and other sustainability targets in the area. more future-oriented idea. Some of these were also collected in the database. So, for example, in Toulouse, in France, they would like to build this 40-story mixed-use skyscraper in the business district of Toulouse, with offices and hotels and restaurants and everything included, and it's going to be covered by this spiral of trees curling around this glass facade. So it's quite a futuristic idea, but again, innovation so nature is good for innovation, and also green buildings are incorporating nature more and more, especially in these future-oriented designs. Lots of Chinese skyscrapers have now nature included, and of course Singapore is full of these buildings, so they have a very comprehensive green building policy that helps facilitate this process. This is the Erasmus World Plan. This is in The Hague in the Netherlands, and it's sort of an experimental sustainable neighborhood that is now being built, so it's under construction, but it's actually being built next to an important ecological zone. So they would like to create this neighborhood in a way that it's sort of an experimental neighborhood that tries to take care of this highly sensitive ecological area, and they are doing a really thorough job at making sure that the environment is not going to get harmed. So that's the plan in The Hague. In Edinburgh, this is just a quick example, is they incentivize people to adopt sort of a square meter for butterflies. So you can contribute with this yourself. They have a list of recommendations on how you can do it in your roof, how you can do it in your little garden. And basically they teach people to cater to butterflies and all sorts of insects by recommending them specific kind of plants. And also there is some funding from the municipality if you would like to have a square meter for butterflies in your garden, in your roof, or somewhere else. So this has been quite a successful initiative in Edinburgh. In Sofia, Bulgaria, which is a more Eastern European country, they still managed to get some civic engagement when it comes to tree planting. So basically there is a new citizens forest that is under planting, which is crowdfunded by the citizens. So, basically it's a good example of civic engagement when it comes to planting trees, I think, especially because people who live in Sofia are also not very rich citizens, and yet they have managed to get enough funds to start an eco-corridor that links the peri-urban forest, which you can see on the picture, that with the city core through sort of an eco-corridor. So now fresh air can reach the center of the city, and it is improving air quality. This idea, for example, came up by an NGO called Grupa Grad, and basically they wanted to turn Sofia into a green capital. We have this award in Europe, the European Green Capital. Each year there is a city that is becoming the green capital of Europe, and they wanted to have Sofia as a green capital. And so this was the political motivation for them to do it. This is why they managed to convince the municipality that we should do this, because it's quite a big thing in Europe to be the green capital. It's only one city each year, so it's quite a prestige and quite an honor. We will see. Maybe in a couple of years, Sofia will achieve it. Probably not until 2025 or something, but still, it's a good initiative that will maybe get them somewhere. Okay, so I just wanted to give you a taste of the database. Again, you can find it accessible online. You can search it yourself. You can look into projects. But now I wanted you guys to actually think of a couple of examples that could be applicable in Pskov. So I have 4 case studies. I also have them written here shortly, but I also will introduce them briefly through presentation slides. but I will need 4 groups. So what I suggest is that I give you each a number, and then you can get together based on your number. The first one, so group number 1, you will have to think about this case. This is also from a post-socialist city, Leipzig in Germany, where a communal gardening project happened in this densely populated area. It's similar to, it's sort of like a panel building, a prefabricated area. It's quite a poor place, an economically disadvantaged place in the city, and with lots of these prefabricated panel buildings. And so local communities basically came together, a couple of gardening enthusiasts who wanted to turn this area into a more green and livable place. And they wanted to use this vacant plot. Basically, there was an empty area between these buildings. And they basically set up this community garden, communal garden in this public space for all sorts of gardening activities, workshops, cultural evenings, which are now held in this area. They collaborate with the local school. They collaborate with the youth section of a nearby social club. And basically, they want to bring local residents to this high-quality green space, which is, again, in a pretty poor area. So they want to turn this place into sort of a meaningful leisure and engagement place. And they have managed to do that based on their own resources. And the municipality just gives them a permission. Basically, they say that, okay, you guys can do your activities as long as you don't disturb the public by being noisy or by producing too much trash or degrading the environment. So they were allowed to do this by the municipality, but everything was done by the citizens and the local community. So, and again, Leipzig is quite a disadvantaged city. So it used to be an industrial city in East Germany. After the collapse of the Soviet Union and the collapse of the Berlin Wall, the city got depopulated. So they lost about 200,000 citizens. So they have lots of economical and social challenges with drug use and substance use. So this is quite a challenging area, and still they have managed to create this vibrant public space. So this is the first case study. The second case study, so group number 2, you will focus on more of a company-based initiative. This is from Hungary, from the Audi Hungaria company, which is a larger engine manufacturing company that is in Győr. They have a larger green space. So between their factory buildings, they have a huge green space. About 70% of the space is green. And what they have done is they have restored this green space. And one of their initiatives was to do beekeeping, which was funded by the company, but it's not a very costly thing. So it doesn't cost a lot of money. And they now have 6 beehives with about 300,000 bees. And what's interesting is they use these bees to train their staff, to sensitize them, make them understand the importance of bees and biodiversity. They also have school children visiting this company and do beekeeping activities. And another interesting thing they do is they use bees to monitor air quality. So when bees collect pollen, they produce honey and beeswax and all sorts of bee products. You can take samples from it and measure air quality. So this is what also the company does, is measure air quality by taking samples from the honey that the bees produce in this company area. So I think it's quite a good example of how can companies contribute to biodiversity and nature conservation. Third one is also from Győr, from Hungary, and it's about school gardening. So school gardens so this is group number 3, okay? So school gardens have a larger history in Győr. About 5,000 square meter school gardens existed here, where children basically learned how to do gardening and agriculture. Most of these, sort of collapsed in the last 50 years. starting from 1940s, during the Second World War, and afterwards, most of these disappeared. But now we have a new school gardening revolution. Since about 5 years ago, these school gardens started to appear again in Győr, and partly because these have really good educational values. So it teaches children about sustainability in a formal school environment. It teaches environmental stewardship. It can be integrated into normal educational programs, both in the university and in elementary school. It's enriching, all sorts of subjects. Students can get out there and study math or geography, even in the garden. It educates healthy living, healthy food, and also it teaches children cooperation, work ethics, planning, scheduling, also patience. And they have a lot of fun, because at the end of the season, they can taste what they have grown, they can taste the fruits of their own labor. And this doesn't cost much. You can get a school garden implemented from about 100 euros. You just need some tools, you just need a committed teacher, and you just need the children who are there in the school anyway. And if you help them do this, they will enjoy it a lot. And so this is, again, an interesting movement that doesn't cost a lot of money, and it teaches a lot and contributes to urban biodiversity and urban nature. And the fourth one is actually not from Europe. This is where I have done research in Canada. But since I have seen the frozen river here in Pskov, I thought maybe it would be interesting for you guys to think about the possibilities. So this happened in Winnipeg, which is a Canadian small city. They have basically a large skating trail on their river. This was initiated by a company that is managing the riverbank. Basically, they organize all sorts of cultural activities like theater, cinema, museums, etc. And they have realized that people don't really get out there, and they don't enjoy their services during the winter time. So they wanted to attract more people. So what they did is they started to maintain the river ice, so create a path for ice skating, and this they hoped would bring people there, and it became very famous actually. Nowadays it's about 700,000 people visit the ice in Winnipeg. You can get on the ice in many different places of the city, and it's a very popular activity. Many people actually commute to work on ice, so they don't use their cars, but just put on an ice skate, and this is how they go to work on an average Monday. Plus, over the weekend, all sorts of cultural activities are organized, shows, dining, all sorts of drinking stuff, hockey, curling, sports, etc. And it's quite a popular activity there. And this made Winnipeg a famous winter city in Canada. And I was wondering if you think something like that could happen in Pskov. So that's going to be your little assignment. I have all of these written up as a sort of short case study. If you would like to read more about any of these, I have them printed. But what I would like you guys to do is to take 15 minutes in your groups and think about how could it be implemented in Pskov, or maybe a similar project could be implemented in Pskov. Where could it be implemented? How? So think of an action plan. So you will have about, let's say, 12 minutes to think, understand the case, think about its application in this city, and then just briefly report back to everybody in maybe 2 minutes after you have discussed it. So does it make sense? Okay, cool. Can we hear from the first group that worked in the communal garden place, Leipzig? You can speak in Russian. In 2 minutes, if you could summarize what you discussed. Do you think it's feasible?
Мы предлагаем территорию, которая находится за животным паром. Там находится сейчас новостроек очень много, и там выход к берегу реки Великой. Там достаточно большая территория над рекой, то есть там можно сделать хорошую парковую зону. И, возможно, оборудовать спуск к реке, потому что там достаточно такие пологие склоны из-за выступов известняков.
And this is where it could be implemented. Okay. And who should do it?
Я думаю, что в данном случае нужно обратиться за помощью к администрации города, но в то же время помощь местных жителей, думаю, будет очень уместна, чтобы обустроить данное место и помочь.
Например, жители.
Это у нас практика нормальная в городе. В плане обустройства, особенно если посадка для растений или клубничек.
So if you're interested, you can read the whole story and maybe, again, it's also in the database. So, okay, thank you very much. Second group.
Люди получат возможность проходить по берегу, и вот эта зона, которая была зоной отчуждения между заводом и берегом реки, она получит новое развитие. И...
Это радиозавод?
Нет, это завод «Живые» на Алмазной. И она получит новое развитие, потому как зона новой активности в городе, то есть с улицы, скажем, с моста, сразу переход к обход как бы завода.
Who should implement this? The city or people? Or the companies?
Governments of the city wants to do this deal, and some people who live in this area must be interested in development of this public space. It's important for the city.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks. Group number 3. School garden.
Мы считаем, что хорошим местом для планирования школьного сада и экологии является правый берег реки Псковой в районе Гребянки, что относится к школе номер 17. Там располагается свободный земельный участок близ реки Псковой. Мы предлагаем для реализации проекта создать детский лагерь, который будет заниматься сельскохозяйственной деятельностью на данной территории. Продукты, выращенные на данной территории, будут являться экологически чистыми и будут употребляться в школьной столовой. Из-за этого уменьшится стоимость детских обедов, но для этого нужно спонсирование администрации школы в плане покупки семян, саженцев и все принадлежности для выращивания.
Thank you. Group number 4 on the river thing.
Мы предлагаем сделать зимний каток зеленый на реке Великой, так как это река широкая в Пскове, и к ней имеется приличный спуск к воде, получается, на самой набережной. Проблема является то, что у нас не постоянно получается, и река не всегда замерзает. Также на реке иногда у нас проводятся различные мероприятия, типа масленицы.
Средства обустроивания там катка можно устроить некую проходную зону с одного берега до другого, чтобы люди в центре города могли передвигаться с одного района в другой не только по мосту.
And who should do this? So who should maintain the ice? Is it the municipality or is it the company who could pay for maintaining it? Or an NGO or communities?
Volunteers.
Volunteers, okay. In Canada, it's a company that does it, and they do it because more people come with cars, so they pay parking fees, which they collect, and people buy hot chocolate, coffee, food, so they also get the money from that. So for them, it's really good business to maintain the ice because it brings people there who pay for services. So this is how they do it in Canada. So I think it's a good example. Okay, so thank you very much. Concluding thoughts. Because in Europe we see a lot of these projects. You can look at the database, you will find hundreds of examples of what could be done when it comes to nature and the city. But most of these remain isolated, so we don't see them happen everywhere because there isn't enough money or political motivation or citizens don't know about it. And this need to build nature-based solutions is especially huge in Eastern Europe, like countries like Russia or Belarus, but even in Hungary. And in many places, the government, they don't really step up and do something. So in many cases, the citizens need to. And the citizens need to come up with ideas. And sometimes it's very cheap. For example, a school garden, it's really, really cheap. So you can implement one from less than €100. You just need a teacher, you just need motivation and ideas. So this is, I think, an important conclusion. Quite a lot of work left to do on social dimensions. So how do you engage people? How do you motivate them to take part in this? Because we are not only talking about nature and biodiversity and ecological spaces, but public spaces where people live and play and work and walk through. And again, this is a challenge in Eastern Europe. How do you engage people? How do you make them need public space, green space? Because this is not something that people ask for. If you ask people what they want in their city, they want better roads, they want more parking, they want cheaper electricity, whatever. They are not going to ask for green space. So it's again something that is quite cultural. You need to make people understand that this is really important and that they can also contribute. Another important point is these solutions provide a lot of benefits to the cities, also in terms of financial benefits. So cities benefit from using nature. They need to spend less money on different kinds of services, health services, sometimes less money on road infrastructure because more people start to walk. The air is cooler during the summertime, so you need less air conditioning. Nature absorbs stormwater, so you need less drainage channels and stormwater retention areas. So all of these can be quantified. You can put a price tag on them. They cost money. And if you can convince a city that this is good for them economically, they might help you more in implementing such projects. For example, in the Netherlands, there is a community garden similar to the one in Germany, and the city pays for them because they keep people occupied, they keep people with disabilities healthy, they keep them in a community. So the city considers community garden as a health service, so sort of like a healthcare provider, and they pay the community garden for taking care of these people. So again, that's something that can be calculated, quantified, again, and it uses nature to generate social benefits. And another point, the final point, is that about 60-70% of our infrastructure that we will have in 30-40 years is not built yet. So lots of parts of the city are being rebuilt, everything is being constantly reconstructed, new cities are growing, the existing cities are also growing, so there's a huge potential to integrate nature into the problems that cities have, and the problems that cities are trying to solve, such as, again, stormwater problems, making sure that cities are cool during the summer, that the air is clean. So all of these are urban challenges that needs to be solved, and we are still building our cities as we speak. So it's a huge opportunity to include nature in the cities. And if you go out there and start to work somewhere, you should think of using nature in an urban environment because it really helps us stay ahead of the game. The cities are, as I mentioned, leading the world right now. Cities, everything is urbanizing. And so cities are the places where problems make sense. And this is where there are lots of resources and money to do something as well. The key outcome of the conference I attended in Canada, in Montreal, was sort of a message of goodwill, which I'm not going to read, but I really like this thought that so innovative nature-based solutions are needed to reconnect people to nature and reconnect people through nature. So I think it's a quite powerful thought that people need nature to be connected to each other as well. And this approach has helped a lot of Western European cities to be more livable and higher quality, and this is why people would like to go and live there. Yeah, so nature is quite important when it comes to well-being and quality of life. So thank you for your attention and for your ideas. And I guess we're going to have a break now.